Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the atmosphere shift? No one says it aloud, yet the glances, the silence, and the forced smiles are enough to tell you, someone here does not like you. That quiet hostility never comes head-on. It hides in polite words, in half-hearted compliments, in the way the energy seems to sink the moment you arrive. The question is, what should you do? Argue, explain, or pretend not to notice? Stoic philosophy points us to another path, a path of silence yet strength, where you do not need to shout to affirm yourself. You only need to stand firm, calm, and let your life itself become the answer. In this video, I will share 9 quiet yet strategic ways to rise above hatred, not with words, but with steadfast presence. 1. Forgiveness. Lay down the burden. Keep your freedom. Forgiveness is one of the hardest acts a person can perform, yet it is also the purest expression of inner strength. When people think of forgiveness, many misunderstand it as weakness, as allowing others to cross boundaries, or as abandoning justice just to preserve peace. In truth, forgiveness has little to do with the one who wronged you. It is not the erasure of what happened, nor is it a false handshake of reconciliation. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is the decision to free yourself from the weight of resentment, anger, and the toxic emotions that drain your life each day. When you refuse to forgive, you believe you hold power by remembering the faults of others, yet in reality you become a prisoner of your own memory and emotions. The Stoics repeatedly emphasized that the only thing fully within your control is your own thoughts, choices, and actions. Betrayal, harm, or slander from others lies beyond your influence. You cannot govern the poison in their minds, but you can decide how to respond. You can choose not to let their bitterness poison your life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Forgiveness is the way to affirm that truth. By releasing hatred, you do not mirror cruelty. You become free, independent, and unbound by the venom of resentment. Resentment has a quiet yet corrosive power. It is like acid dripping day after day, eroding the peace of the mind. Those who carry resentment rarely realize how much time and energy they give to the past, leaving the present distorted and the future clouded. Forgiveness is like laying down a heavy load after a long journey. Your shoulders discover a lightness they have never felt before. This is not weakness, but the strength to dare to liberate yourself. To the Stoics, forgiveness is a silent declaration. I no longer allow the past to define me. Forgiveness is also training reason to rise above emotion. Epictetus said that if someone can make you angry, they have become your master. This reveals a simple truth. When you let yourself be ruled by anger or revenge, you hand over control of your life. Forgiveness is reclaiming that power. It does not change the past, but it transforms your relationship to it. Instead of remaining a victim bound by memory, you become the author who redefines your story. To practice forgiveness is to focus only on what matters and what is within your control. You cannot control rumors, malice, or the behavior of others, but you can control the peace within yourself. Forgiveness is telling yourself, my peace is no longer up for negotiation by anyone's actions. This is a strength no one can take away because it lies entirely in your hands. That is what makes forgiveness a form of quiet victory, unyielding, unspoken because your enemy no longer has power over your soul. 2. Keeping silence before provocation. There is a truth most of us forget. Not every attack deserves a response. The world will always have people who test your limits using words, gestures, even silence to provoke, hoping you lose yourself in anger. But if you fall into that trap, you have allowed them to decide your emotions. The Stoics understood that an outburst of rage is never a mark of strength, but evidence that you are being controlled. Stoic philosophy teaches that silence is not avoidance, but a conscious choice. When insulted, you can rebel, but that only fuels another spiral of tension. Instead, you may choose silence, letting the attack fade like an echo into emptiness. Epictetus reminded us that it is not events that harm us, but our response to them. If you believe words can wound you, they will, but if you remain clear-minded, you see them for what they are, mere sounds, powerless, unless you grant them weight. Silence in such moments is not cowardice, but the strength of one who knows there is nothing to prove. When you react instantly, you admit that the other holds sway over your state of mind. By contrast, silence declares that your thoughts and emotions belong to you alone. This is a different kind of strength, one that radiates from calmness and mastery within. In modern society, many mistake quick, sharp reactions as signs of confidence. But the truth is the opposite. The ability to remain calm under provocation is the real sign of stability. The Stoics valued delaying reaction, for it creates space where reason can rise above impulse. In silence, you can observe, distinguish what truly matters from mere noise, and act only when needed. This composure separates the one who is led from the one who leads. Silence also carries a subtle power. It forces the aggressor to confront themselves. Those who try to provoke feel unsettled when they see their efforts fail. They expect an discipline. This not only disarms them, but exposes the futility of their attempt. Without a word, your silence sends the message, "You do not control me." The Stoics also stressed that silence does not mean tolerating abuse without end. It is not endless submission. Silence is a tool, a shield that protects you from reckless reaction. When you finally choose to speak, it comes from reason, not impulse. In this way, silence is the first step to control, and control is the foundation of freedom. Keeping silence before provocation is not only a personal response, but a strategy for life. It preserves energy, prevents meaningless battles, and keeps your mind fixed on what truly matters. The Stoics refused to trade their peace for a fleeting moment of anger. They understood that silence is sometimes the loudest answer, for it guards you not only from external chaos, but proves that your soul has matured, steady and unshaken by the noise of the world. 3. Serenity. Choosing peace over being right. Serenity is one of the most elusive yet most essential qualities in Stoic philosophy. Many mistake serenity for indifference, believing it to be detachment from everything or avoidance of responsibility. But serenity in the Stoic sense is entirely different. It is not neglect or lack of care, but a conscious decision to preserve peace within, even when surrounded by conflict, friction, and injustice. It is not a refusal to face reality, but the choice to place inner calm above the need to win every argument. People are often drawn into battles over right and wrong by the ego, by the need to prove their worth through debate and assertion. When someone insults, attacks, or distorts the truth, the natural reaction for most is to respond, to defend the self, to prove they are not wrong, or at least not weak. Yet the Stoics knew that endless disputes rarely yield real outcomes. What they leave behind is usually exhaustion, lost peace, and sometimes lasting wounds for both sides. Serenity does not mean ignoring truth or accepting injustice, but recognizing that some battles are not worth fighting because the price is your own peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people act wrongly not because they intend to harm you, but because they do not know better. Understanding this helps us temper bitterness and hold on to serenity. When confronted with hurtful behavior, you may react like most anger, arguments, and a descent into weariness. But there is another choice: to remain composed, to accept that the other acts from ignorance, and not to let it rob you of your calm. This choice is difficult, yet wise, for it gives you mastery over your emotions instead of letting others govern your state of mind. In modern life, where social media and news demand immediate reactions, serenity is rare yet invaluable. Many think quick and sharp responses show intelligence and strength, but true wisdom and power lie in holding silence and observing before reacting. To the Stoics, serenity is a shield that guards against the noise outside. When you place the peace of your soul above the hunger for right and wrong, you no longer fall into pointless conflicts, and you preserve energy for what truly matters. Serenity is not the final goal, but a means to remain clear-sighted and true to your values. When you choose peace over clinging to being right, you do not diminish yourself. You prove that your worth does not need validation through confrontation. This serenity makes you steadfast, for it shows you have risen above the ego and chosen to live by reason. And that is the true strength of the Stoic: not victory in every debate, but victory over the self, keeping the soul unshaken by trivial things. Serenity is the silent declaration that your life is not shaped by the constant need for recognition, but by the inner freedom you cultivate each day. It is the reminder that sometimes the way to win is not to enter the fight at all, and that peace within is always worth more than any outward victory. 4. Rebuilding, let results be the answer. When faced with betrayal, loss, or attack, the first instinct of many is to retaliate. We want to prove we are not weak, that we cannot be disregarded, and the fastest way seems to be with words or actions against those who hurt us. But Stoic philosophy shows that such reactions bring no peace. They bind you into an endless cycle of resentment and defense. The Stoic chooses a different path. Instead of arguing or striking back, they channel all energy into rebuilding themselves, letting their results become the most powerful response. Rebuilding is not a sudden act, but a steady process, demanding discipline and persistence. It begins with accepting reality, facing loss, and realizing that while the past cannot be changed, the present is still in your hands. The Stoic wastes no time on blame, for they know that time spent in anger is time stolen from the work of renewal. They do not ask, "Why did this happen to me?" but, "What can I do now to turn this into training for myself?" This shift in mindset transforms tragedy into opportunity, forming the foundation of rebuilding. When you pour your strength into renewal, you send a silent yet powerful message. You are not defined by failure or betrayal, but by how you rise afterward. Every slander, every scheme loses weight when met with the reality that you keep moving forward, still building value, still standing strong. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." Rebuilding is the clearest embodiment of that wisdom. You need not explain or defend yourself, for the results alone will speak with undeniable force. Rebuilding is also proof that you choose action over reaction. Reactions come from emotion. Actions are guided by reason and long-term vision. When you are busy constructing a new path, there is no room left for bitterness or despair. The work of renewal itself becomes a remedy, freeing the mind from the grip of the past and fixing it on what is within reach now. This process not only creates outer results, but also strengthens the inner self, for each step affirms that you still govern your own life. The Stoics believed success does not need to be announced. It is like dawn, no applause required, yet powerful enough to dispel the night. When you rebuild with integrity and persistence, others cannot help but notice. Those who once wished for your fall will grow silent, not because you sought revenge, but because your very existence becomes proof beyond denial that you are stronger than they imagined. And this is a form of quiet triumph, neither loud nor defensive, but deeper and more lasting than any revenge. Rebuilding is your affirmation to yourself that life is not decided by your falls, but by how you rise after them. Instead of letting wounds become shackles, you turn them into stones, paving a new road. The results you create are the sharpest reply, not for your enemies, but first and foremost for yourself. That you are never defeated, you only grow more resilient. An explosion, but meet 8. Discipline. This not only disarms them, but exposes the futility of their attempt. Without a word, your silence sends the message, "You do not control me." The Stoics also stressed that silence does not mean tolerating abuse without end. It is not endless submission. Silence is a tool, a shield that protects you from reckless reaction. When you finally choose to speak, it comes from reason, not impulse. In this way, silence is the first step to control, and control is the foundation of freedom. Keeping silence before provocation is not only a personal response, but a strategy for life. It preserves energy, prevents meaningless battles, and keeps your mind fixed on what truly matters. The Stoics refused to trade their peace for a fleeting moment of anger. They understood that silence is sometimes the loudest answer, for it guards you not only from external chaos, but proves that your soul has matured, steady and unshaken by the noise of the world. 3. Serenity. Choosing peace over being right. Serenity is one of the most elusive yet most essential qualities in Stoic philosophy. Many mistake serenity for indifference, believing it to be detachment from everything or avoidance of responsibility. But serenity in the Stoic sense is entirely different. It is not neglect or lack of care, but a conscious decision to preserve peace within, even when surrounded by conflict, friction, and injustice. It is not a refusal to face reality, but the choice to place inner calm above the need to win every argument. 6. Mastering attention. Attention is the most precious resource we possess, for wherever it goes, energy and action follow. The Stoics recognized that those who cannot govern their attention are easily scattered, losing focus and slipping into a passive life. By contrast, the one who masters attention shapes life itself, for they direct all strength toward what is essential. For this reason, training attention was seen as the foundation of self-mastery and the key to inner peace. In modern life, attention is under constant attack. Information floods in. Digital noise seeps into every moment, and the mind becomes a battleground for outside forces competing for control. The result is busyness without progress, exhaustion without growth. The Stoics warned that a mind continually dragged away loses clarity to see what truly matters. Thus, the first step in mastering attention is to limit input, cut distractions and consciously choose what we allow into the mind. Mastering attention is not about forcing focus every moment, but about learning to return to the present whenever distraction arises. The Stoics emphasized living fully in the moment, for only the present is within our control. When attention drifts to the past, it breeds regret. When it races to the future, it feeds anxiety. Anchored in the present, the mind remains clear, able to handle the task at hand instead of drowning in imagined scenarios. Another key practice in mastering attention is choosing to do fewer things, but more deeply. Rather than scattering energy across countless activities, the Stoics focused on a few meaningful goals and gave themselves fully to them. This not only raised the quality of their work, but also strengthened their inner confidence, for each investment of attention brought genuine satisfaction. It proved that focused effort yields far greater value than shallow dispersion. Over time, the habit of governing attention builds a resilient mind, one not easily shaken by the world around it. Those who train this ability are no longer swept away by distraction, but become the guides of their own lives. They keep clarity, set boundaries, and protect their focus as a treasure. And once attention is mastered, the foundation is laid to master every other part of life, for every change, every growth begins where we place the mind. 7. Value time. Of all that humans possess, time is the one resource that can never be regained. Once it passes, it is gone forever, leaving behind only the imprint of how we chose to use it. The Stoics regarded wasting time as a moral failure, for it meant indifference toward the most precious gift nature has given us. While we worry about losing money, property, or status, the truth is, those things can be restored, but time never can. Our attitude toward time therefore reflects directly our attitude toward life itself. The waste of time rarely appears as one great act, but creeps in through small daily habits. A little procrastination, a few distractions, a series of meaningless activities together, they carve vast, empty spaces in life. The Stoics recognized that these gaps do more than rob us of progress. They create deep regret. For in the end, people do not suffer for what they did, but for what they missed simply because they did not use time wisely. Valuing time does not mean cramming as many activities as possible into each day. The Stoics did not encourage false busyness. They emphasized selectivity and purpose in every action. They asked, "Does this truly matter? Does it bring me closer to the person I wish to become?" When an activity carries no value, it is merely waste disguised. This perspective allows one to separate empty motion from genuine progress, and thus to use time with clarity and direction. One method of managing time well is to give each day a structure. The Stoics often began mornings with reflection to define priorities, and ended evenings with review to draw lessons. This was not about controlling every detail, but about ensuring each day was enclosed within a circle of awareness. In this way, time did not pass vaguely, but was turned into a meaningful current. When a person begins to treat time as their most precious asset, they also begin to build inner confidence. Each hour well spent becomes proof that life is not wasted. Each hour lost, by contrast, leaves a deeper sense of loss. This contrast reminds us that every choice in a day is an investment, and as those investments accumulate, they form the foundation of a life directed, clear, and less burdened with regret. To value time, in the Stoic spirit, is not merely a strategy for efficiency, but a philosophy of living. It reminds us that life is finite, and every moment deserves reverence. By prioritizing what matters, removing what is needless, and living with purpose, We make time our ally rather than letting it slip away. And it is this awareness that allows us to truly master our lives. 8. Freedom from approval. One of the subtlest chains binding people is the need for approval. When actions depend on praise, recognition, or agreement, we have handed authority over our lives to others. The Stoics considered this dependence a form of slavery of the mind, for it compels us to live for the crowd rather than according to principle. Each time we act merely to be acknowledged, we blur the true value of the act, turning it into performance instead of a conscious choice. In truth, the praise or judgment of others does not alter the nature of an action. What is right remains right even if no one notices, and what is wrong remains wrong even if it is applauded. The Stoics reminded themselves that intrinsic worth does not rest in applause, but in the unity of thought, word, and deed. Once this is understood, we see that seeking external approval only drains us, while fidelity to principle grants real strength. The need for approval often breeds insecurity. When we live for praise, we tremble at criticism. When we act for recognition, we grow anxious when ignored. Life then becomes a cycle of expectation and disappointment, leaving no space for peace. The Stoics understood that true freedom of mind comes when values are rooted inwardly, immune to the shifting moods of public opinion. For the crowd may cheer today and turn tomorrow, and if our stability depends on them, we will never stand firm. Freedom from approval does not mean rejecting all external input. The Stoics still listened to feedback, but they did not let it define the essence of action. They distinguished between useful counsel for growth and empty flattery or baseless criticism. In this way, they preserved both humility to learn and independence to remain themselves. This is the balance they pursued: to respect others, but not to live for their satisfaction. Once freed from the need for approval, one feels a profound lightness. Actions are done because they are right, not because of an audience. Progress is pursued for its reality, not for applause. One holds steady to the chosen path, regardless of shifting opinion. And it is this steadiness that creates lasting credibility, for people trust those who act from inner conviction rather than external pressure. Such liberation is a vital step in Stoicism, for it restores self-mastery. When we no longer need approval to act, we are free. When we no longer need praise to keep faith, we are strong. And when we no longer let opinion define our worth, we begin to live a principled life, steady, rooted, and unshaken by change. 9. Facing responsibility. Responsibility is an unavoidable part of life, yet people often delay or avoid it because of its burden and pressure. The Stoics taught that avoidance does not remove the weight. It only makes it heavier with time. Each task neglected, each decision postponed, accumulates into a greater load, robbing the mind of peace. Thus, to face responsibility directly is not only a duty, but the only way to preserve the clarity of spirit. Responsibility carries within it the power to train. It forces us to focus, to use reason, and to align our actions with principle. The Stoics regarded carrying responsibility as a method of self-formation, for each duty fulfilled makes the mind more steadfast and character more firmly built. They did not seek escape, for they knew that only under pressure can one's strength be revealed and measured. The difference between a resilient mind and a fragile one lies in its attitude toward responsibility. The one who constantly evades it loses trust in themselves, for deep down they know they have abandoned their duty. The one who faces it, even if imperfectly, preserves self-respect, for they acted rather than fled. The Stoics believe that this self-respect is the foundation of a life of dignity. Facing responsibility also means distinguishing between what belongs to us and what lies beyond our control. One of the Stoics' central principles is to focus on what we can change and release what we cannot. When a person takes responsibility for their part while refusing to waste energy on the impossible, they preserve clarity and reduce needless strain. Responsibility then becomes a tool for order, restoring life to harmony instead of chaos. Carrying responsibility benefits not only oneself but also builds credibility with others. A person who keeps promises, fulfills duties, and avoids blame shifting becomes a reliable anchor for those around them. Such credibility is not won through words, but through the consistent repetition of responsible actions. The Stoics knew that true leadership does not rest in titles or ranks, but in becoming an example of discipline and perseverance in daily work. When responsibility is faced rather than avoided, it transforms into a path of growth. Each acceptance of duty strengthens inner power, builds trust with oneself, and shapes enduring character. The Stoics did not see responsibility as a burden, but as a school where each task is a lesson leading closer to maturity. And once responsibility is valued at this level, pressure is no longer feared, for it is understood as the very tool that makes us resilient and free. 10. Live as an example. A person's greatest strength is not found in words, but in the way they live. An eloquent speech may impress for a moment, but a consistent life is the lasting proof. The Stoics regarded daily conduct as the most powerful form of teaching. Every gesture, every decision, every quiet act of holding to principles speaks more clearly than advice ever could. For words may shift with circumstance, but actions repeated over years form a pattern of life that cannot be denied. To live as an example does not mean seeking perfection, but sustaining honesty and consistency. The Stoics knew that people stumble, yet instead of hiding or excusing mistakes, they chose to correct and realign. It is this frankness toward flaws and steady return to principle that makes their lives a vivid testimony of discipline. Stability does not come from never failing, but from never abandoning the path of self-improvement. A life lived as an example has influence because it needs no promotion. When a person consistently honors commitments, perseveres in their work, and lives with order, others naturally notice and follow. This is how lasting influence is built, not through force, not through persuasion, but by quietly proving through steadiness. Such influence works silently yet deeply, for people trust what they see repeated, not the fleeting promises they hear. The Stoics also knew that living as an example requires long patience. Reputation cannot be formed in a day, it is built brick by brick through countless small actions. Each day lived by principle adds another stone to the wall of character. And once the wall stands firm, it becomes a refuge both for oneself and for those around. Consistency in daily action thus becomes the most valuable asset, for it cannot be taken away and it cannot be faked. To live as an example is also to keep unity between belief and action. The Stoics did not permit a divide between what they claimed to believe and what they actually did. When a person maintains this unity, they preserve inner clarity while building trust. The most important truth I have realized is that the quiet repetition of small actions is what builds lasting strength. There is no shortcut to training the will, and no comfort can replace inner discipline. Those who long for peace yet avoid hardship are, in truth, moving against the nature of growth. For me, the essence lies in clearly discerning what is within my control and directing energy toward it, rather than being carried away by what is external. Mental steadiness, Firmness in action and the ability to uphold principle amid change are the true measures of strength. When people are patient enough to practice this spirit, they not only build a disciplined life, but also leave behind an example for others to follow. If you find these reflections valuable, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what comes next. For the training of mind and spirit is a long journey, and each day offers a chance to take one more steady step. And finally, always remember, the choices you make today will shape the person you become tomorrow. See you in the next video. We grow anxious when ignored. Life then becomes a cycle of expectation and disappointment.